Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes. I do want to remind you that this is a scary story, so the stories will be scary and we will be reading our stories. They're a little long. They're about 7 to 10 minutes each. So make sure you grab a blanket and get ready for the event. We'll start soon. Hi, everyone that just joined in. I know it's 4 o'clock already, so we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Make sure you grab a blanket, grab some candy. You're sitting somewhere comfortably. Our stories, again, are a little bit longer. They're about 7 to 10 minutes each, and we'll get started soon. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our spooky stories. My name is Lorena. I work at the Santa Clara City Library at the Central Park branch. And today our youth services librarian are going to be reading you some scary stories. Can you raise your hand if you can see and hear me? Can you raise your hand? Perfect. Thank you, everybody. So these stories are for older children. I do want to remind you they're going to get scarier as we go on. I'm going to start with a very mild stories from Riley Jefferson's Awesome Friendly Spooky Stories, and then they're going to get scarier and scarier as we go. So make sure that if one scares you, you can not move on to the next one if you choose to. Make sure you're somewhere comfortable because these stories are 7 to 10 minutes long. So I'm going to begin with our first story. That's not too scary, maybe a little bit spooky, called Awesome Friendly Spooky Stories by Riley Jefferson, okay? All right, let's get started. I just wanna make sure, can you hear me? Raise your hand again if you can hear me and see me. Can you raise your hand on Zoom? Perfect, thank you. All right, let's start. The story I'm gonna be reading you today, if you like this book, we have it at the library at all 3 of our branches. The story we're reading today, because it's individual stories, is called A Mummy. Here we go. A long time ago in ancient Egypt, there lived a pharaoh named Mech. And when Mech died, the royal priests and priestesses wrapped his body to prepare it for the afterlife. But a few thousand years later, some archaeologists from another country discovered Mech's pyramid and took his sarcophagus with them. That's kind of rude. When Mech woke up, he was disappointed to find out that he was in a museum and not in the afterlife like he had expected. On top of that, they didn't even put his sarcophagus in a nice spot. They put it next to the bathrooms. So Mech was angry and he used his mummy powers to make a big mess of everything in the museum. But even after Mech destroyed the museum, he was not satisfied. So he went outside, and that's when he really did some damage. That night, Meg was all over the news for wrecking the whole city. Meg was just getting started, though. He went from country to country, destroying everything in his path. And wherever he went, he made headlines. But after a while, Mick ran out of things to destroy, and people started losing interest anyway. Eventually, Mick settled down a little and tried to get used to living in the modern world. And even though he would have rather been in the afterlife, he had to admit that television was a pretty great invention. One night, Mick was watching the news, and there was a story about how some archaeologists made a new discovery in Egypt. They found the tomb of Kaba, a pharaoh who lived a few thousand years ago. Well, at first, Mick started getting angry because this brought back memories of what happened to him. But after a few minutes of deep breathing, he was able to calm down. People were so excited about this new discovery because Kaba's tomb was really glitzy and full of treasures. But everyone was nervous when they opened Kaba's sarcophagus because no one wanted a repeat of the Mech situation. But things were different this time around. First of all, Kaba was much better preserved than Mech. And Mech was kind of annoyed when people on the news kept pointing that out. When Kaba stepped out of his tomb, he didn't just start randomly destroying things. In fact, he seemed really curious about how everything worked in the modern world. Kaba started appearing on morning talk shows, and before long, he was everyone's favorite mummy. And Mech would never admit this, but he was pretty jealous. In fact, Kaba was so popular that people started making all sorts of mummy merchandise and using his image without even asking his permission. So Kaba hired a slick lawyer, and before long, all that stuff was shut down. But then Kaba's lawyer took it a step further. His lawyer trademarked the mummy, which made it so that Kaba was the only one that could use that name. And then she made a big announcement about it on the TV in front of everyone. Well, this really ticked off Mick, who didn't think it was right that Kaba could do that. Plus, Mick was annoyed that he didn't think of it first. After a while, Kaba had his own fashion line with kids' cereals and a major motion picture in the works, and everywhere Meg went, there was Kaba's face. Everywhere, all over the place. Meg thought it was time for him to cash in on this mummy craze too. So he started calling himself the original mummy, and he found a few ads out there. The original mummy, available for birthday parties, corporate events, bar mitzvahs. Ask for Meg. But a few weeks later, Meg got a letter from Kaba's lawyer threatening to sue him for everything he owned unless he took down the ads. But this just made Meg mad. Maybe not as mad as he used to when he would go around destroying cities with his mummy powers and everything, but he was still pretty mad. So Meg hired a lawyer of his own and sued Kaba to try and stop him from calling himself the mummy, since Meg was famous first. And it was a huge trial and everybody watched it on TV. Well, Meg didn't have a lot of money, so his lawyer wasn't as slick as Kaba's. And when the trial ended, the judge ruled that Kaba was the winner. Meg had to agree that he'd never use the name the original mummy or the classic mummy or anything like that. In fact, all he was allowed to do was call himself a mummy, only in lowercase letters. For a while, Meg tried to make some money by calling himself a mummy, but you really can't make a lot of money with that kind of name. Meg started working at an amusement park for Fright Nights in October, but it wasn't that much fun because these days it's really hard to scare people. Meg still wasn't giving up though. He started calling himself the Dead Pharaoh to get around the court agreement. But it turns out there was a wrestler that already had that name, and Mek just ended up back in court. Things were great for Kaba for a few years, but after a while, the whole mummy thing got stale and people stopped going to his movies. Eventually, he got into comedy, but he made a few stinkers, and that was the end of his film career. Then, someone claimed they found a big toe in a box of mummy flakes, and Kaba got sued for $1 million. And even though it turned out that the person who sued him made the whole thing up, nobody wanted to buy any food products with the word mummy on them after that. Would you? Soon, Kaba's money started to dry up and he couldn't afford the fancy lifestyle that he was used to. After a while, he had to sell his private jet and his 3 mansions at a discount. Things got even worse when his wife left him and took half of his money. Kaba finally hit rock bottom when he had to sell his own sarcophagus. But things started to turn around for Kaba when he ran into his old arch enemy Mek, who was working as a food bagger at the local grocery store. The 2 mummies got to talking and turned out they had a lot more in common than they thought. Kaba and Mek became friends after a while, and Kaba moved into Mek's apartment. And even though they didn't always get along as roommates, the one thing that they agreed on was the television really was a pretty great invention. The end. Did you like that story? Raise your hand on Zoom if you like that story. Did you like it? Good. I'm glad you liked it. This is Raleigh Jefferson's awesome, friendly, spooky stories. Now, let me remind you, the stories, I know that one wasn't too bad. They get spookier as we go. So if you were scared now, make sure you keep that in mind for the next one. Here is Miss Jackie with a spooky story.
Hello, everyone. This is Miss Jackie. Thank you, Lorena, for sharing that wonderful story. I have our next scary story. This one is called Talipo, a ghost story. And this one is written by Joanna Galdon. So I'll show you the book really quick. It is kind of spooky. Are you guys ready for this one? All right, here we go. Now remember, if you get too scared, just pull up that blanket over your head and you'll be just fine. All right, the Talipo. A long time ago, an old man lived by himself in the deep, big woods. His cabin had only one room, and that room was his parlor, his bedroom, his dining room, and his kitchen too. The old man had 3 dogs. One was called Uno, one was called Ino, and one was called Come Tico Calico. One day the man decided to go hunting and to catch something for his supper. Here, 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 he shouted to his dogs, and they came bounding off the porch, eager for a chase. After many hours of hunting, the wind began to blow hard from the valley. Whoosh. It'll be dark soon, the old man said, and all we've caught is this skinny rabbit. He headed home, afraid he might go to bed hungry that night. The old man cooked and ate the rabbit and gave the bones to the dogs. He then leaned back in his chair and watched the moon as it rose up big and full. The wind whistled around the cabin. Whoosh. Just as the old man was about to doze off, a most curious creature crept through a crack between the logs in the wall. It had a big, long, furry tail. As soon as the old man saw the varmint, he reached for his hatchet, and with one lick, he cut off its tail. Before the man could raise his hatchet a second time, the creature slipped out through the crack and ran away. The old man was still hungry, so he took that big, long tail, cooked it, and ate it. After that, he stuffed up the crack of the wall and went to bed. His stomach was full and he felt so warm and snug that before he knew it, he was asleep. The old man hadn't been asleep very long when he woke up. Something was in his cabin. It sounded like a cat. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Who's that? The old man asked. He lay and listened. After a while, he heard a voice say, Talipo, Talipo, all I want is my Talipo. The scratching went on, and the old man began to shiver and shake. Then he remembered his dogs. He went to the door and called, Here, here, here. The dogs came piling out from under the porch, and with their noses to the ground, they chased that thing deep into the deep, big woods. The old man pulled his covers up tightly around him and went back to sleep. In the middle of the night, he woke up again. Now he heard something trying to get in right above the cabin door. Who's that? He called. And what do you want at this time of night when all good folks should be in bed? He listened and he could hear it going. Scratch, scratch, scratch. And then he heard a voice say, Talipo, Talipo, I'm coming to get my Talipo. The old man was so scared he couldn't stand up. So he called his dogs from his bed. Uno, I know, come Tico Calico, here, here, here. And the dogs came bursting around the corner of the cabin. They caught up with that wild thing at the gate and tore the whole fence down trying to get at it. Then they chased it into the swamp. At last, it was quiet again. With a weary sigh, the man went back to sleep. Toward the morning, something down in the swamp woke the old man up. First, he thought it was the wind blowing louder than usual. Whoosh. But then he listened again, and he heard that voice crying, You know, and I know, all I want is my Talipo. The old man called his dogs, Here, here, here. Uno, I know, come Tico Calico. This time, the dogs did not come. The old man ran outside into the moonlight and called again, Here, dogs, here, here, here. But there was no trace of them. There was just the sound of the wind blowing around the torn down fence. That thing had led the dogs way off into the swamp and lost them. Sadly, the man went back inside the cabin and shut the barred door. Then he went back to bed. Just before daylight, the old man opened his eyes the way people do when they feel like there's someone in the room. Something was stirring among the pots and the pans. Then something that sounded like a cat began climbing up the covers at the foot of the bed. The man listened and heard it scratch, scratch, scratch. He looked over the foot of his bed and saw two pointed ears. Then he saw two big, round, fiery eyes staring at him. The man wanted to call for help, but he was too scared. That thing kept crawling up until it was right next to the old man. Then, in a low voice, You know, and I know that I'm here to get my Talipo. The man sat up and pulled the covers over his head. All at once, he got his voice and said, I haven't got your Talipo. Yes, you have, said the thing. Yes, you have. And it jumped on top of the man and scratched everything to pieces. Now there's nothing left of the old man's cabin in the deep, big woods except the chimney. But folks who live in the valley say that when the moon shines and the wind blows, you can hear a voice saying, Talipo, Talipo, Now I've got my Taily Po. All right, guys, that's the end of this one. The Taily Po, a ghost story. Again, it is told by Joanna Galdon. All right, we're going to move on to Miss Rachel, who has another scary story for you.
Ooh, that was a scary voice, Miss Jackie. I don't know. All right, so this one's pretty scary. I just want to warn you. I hope you stick around. I'm going to actually be reading a story from this book called Don't Turn Out the Lights. But if you want to turn out the lights, that's up to you. This is a compilation. It's a ton of different writers. It's a really great book if you like scary stories. And it came out this year, so it's pretty new. Are you ready? You ready to be scary? I am Rachel, and I am going to read a story about a black cat. It's called The Cries of a Cat by Josh Mallerman. All right. Martin lived with his parents and his grandma and his cat until one day his parents told him they had to take grandma away because she had become dangerous. Martin understood because grandma had been acting strange lately. The cat loved grandma and it vanished the same day she was taken away. Don't worry about the cat, Mom said. The cat will be fine. But Martin worried. The cat was so small and helpless out in the big world beyond their home. And the cat was black too. So how would anyone see it at night? It might get hurt. It might get lost. It might never come home again. Each evening before bed, Martin stood at his window and looked for the cat outside. He stared into the darkness, hoping to see two shiny eyes, hoping to see some movement. Once he did see a cat, but it was an orange one, not the black one he was hoping for. Don't worry about the cat, Dad said. Cats know how to fend for themselves. But Martin was worried. The days passed and the cat didn't come home. Martin put a can of cat food on the front porch. Later, he heard scratching out there and ran to find the can of empty food, but no cat. It could have been any cat, Dad said, a stray cat. On the way to school, Martin looked for a cat. He called it. He made noises like a cat to hear. No cats heard him, and no cats came to him. Certainly not the black one he was hoping for. His teacher caught him looking out the classroom window. What are you looking for, Martin? My cat. Then the whole class gathered by the window to look. Later at dinner, Mom told Martin to stop asking about the cat. There are other problems in the world, Martin, she said. I think it's time you moved on, Dad said. It's been 2 weeks. I don't think the cat's coming home. But that night, Martin heard the cat crying. Meow, meow. Can you do that at home? Meow, 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 meow. He got out of bed and went to the window. He stared for a long time. Meow, meow. But the noise was coming from behind him, from somewhere inside the house. So Martin went downstairs and he searched. He looked under the kitchen table, in the cupboards, under the couch. At one point, he thought he could smell cat food and a dirty litter box. So he checked the box in the bathroom by the kitchen. It looked like the cat could have been there recently, but he found no cat. The next afternoon, he heard the cat crying again. Meow, meow. Mom, Martin said. Dad, did you hear that? Mom and Dad were busy.
Mom was signing papers in her office, and Dad was cleaning out the attic. Martin searched the garage. He looked under the car and inside the car and up where Mom and Dad stored boxes. That night, he had a bad dream about a cat being found by a wolf. The wolf was able to see in the dark and spotted the black cat easily. It snuck up on the cat, and while it was crying for home, he ate him. Martin woke up very sad and scared. The next day, he heard the cat crying again. Meow, 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 meow. Can you do that at home? Meow, meow. Mom and Dad were both away at the store. Martin went into his bedroom window. The sky outside was bleak. He didn't see any sign of a cat, no sign of anything at all. He searched the house. He looked under Mom and Dad's bed. He looked in their closet. He looked in their attic. He searched through bags, luggage, pillowcases. After he looked everywhere on the second floor, he went downstairs. Meow, meow. He looked under the couch. He looked in the kitchen cupboards, in Mom's office. He searched the living room and the laundry room, the dining room, the bathroom, and the den. He even went out to the back deck and looked at the big gray world, searching for any sign of a cat. Meow, meow. The cry was definitely coming from inside the house. Martin went back in and searched all over again. He searched the shadows and the dark corners of every room, the places where something small and black might hide. Am I getting warmer? He said. Meow, meow. Am I getting colder? Meow, meow. Martin didn't know what to do or where to look. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall. It sounded like a cat was inside the wall. Meow. It sounded like a cat was inside the wall. Cat, are you in there? Meow, meow. Martin followed the wall, knocking until he reached the basement door and held his closed fist in front of the wood. It smelled like cat from where he stood. He hadn't searched the basement yet. Meow, meow. I'm coming, Cat, Martin cried. Meow. Martin opened the basement door and said, Cat, I'm here. But it was not the cat. It was Grandma crouched upon the basement stairs, smiling up at Martin. Her skin looked pale and wrinkled. Her hair was undone and messy. She was squinting into the light, making the sound of a cat, speaking like the cat. Grandma gone mad, pretending she was the cat. Meow, meow, meow. The end. Thanks for listening. All right, we have one more short story for you. Miss Jackie's going to read. Thanks for listening. And this one's kind of scary too, just to warn you, okay?
Hello, everybody. I'm back again. So I'm going to be reading our last story from Half Minute Horrors. Sorry, this label's in the way. Anyways, this is a really cool book that has a bunch of cool and short stories that are like ghost stories or something to give you a little bit of the chills. All right, so the one I'm going to be reading is called At the Water's Edge, and this is by Ayelet Waldman. All right. The water is still and so clear that I can see the tangled stems of the lily pads leading down to the muddy bottom. I have made a careful study of the lilies, their white outer leaves that shade to pale pink and finally to magenta. The pistils are bright orange, the color of the color dress my mother was wearing when she left for work this morning, only a few minutes before the children came. I am paying such close attention to the blossoms floating in the pond because I don't want to look at the children. The pond is small and they have surrounded it entirely. They stand very still, staring at me. I don't think they even blink, but since I try to avoid their eyes, I cannot really tell. They don't say a word. It has been hours since before they burst through the doors and crawled through the windows, silent all the while, even when they snatched my little sister from her crib and bundled her away. My mother should be home by now. They have never once spoken or shouted, even when I managed to tear loose from their filthy hands and race out to the pond. They chased me, their fingers brushing the edges of my clothing. I leaped into the canoe and paddled out into the middle of the pond. A smart thing to do, it turned out, since it seems like they cannot swim. But the pond is shallow, and soon enough they'll figure out that they can wade. Already I see one or two of them testing the waters with their dirt-encrusted toes. I hear the noise of an engine, and only now do I allow myself to burst into tears. My mother is home. Her car is coming up the driveway. She will chase them away. Except the car door is opening, and it is not my mother who is stepping out. It is one of the children, dirty and disheveled, with torn clothes and bare feet. I am staring at the child who has replaced my mother, and there is no air left in my lungs. The child lifts her hand and waves. It will soon be dark. All right, that's the end of our scary stories for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully it wasn't too bone chilling for you all. We're glad that you joined us. We have many more fun activities and events coming up next month. Please have a wonderful and safe Halloween. Bye everyone.